federal jury found both Terrence Richardson and Ferrone Claiborne not guilty of Alan Gibson's murder, yet they're spending life in prison. Alan's daughter believes the right two men are behind bars. Crissana meets Terrence and Ferrone's family for the first time.
These people lied to you. It had nothing to do with the death of your father.
Let's do it.
Have a good show, everybody. Here we go.
This is a safe place to talk about hard things.
Stand by. We'll count you down.
Today is going to be a changing day in your life.
5, 4.
Get ready. Take care of you. In the small town of Waverly, Virginia, a young, up-and-coming white police officer, Alan Gibson, was brand new to the force and excited about his new job. While on patrol in the early morning hours of April 25, 1998, Alan saw a man run into the woods. He suspected a drug deal was going down, so he followed. And that's when he locked eyes with two black men. What happened next sent shockwaves through this tiny town.
3 lives forever changed. Ferrone Claiborne, Terrence Richardson, and Waverly Police Officer Alan Gibson. And it all began in these woods. 25-year-old Officer Gibson was gunned down in these woods behind the Waverly Village apartment complex. Officer Gibson, with a wife and daughter, was flown to the hospital but couldn't be saved. Within a couple days, 27-year-old Terrence Richardson and 22-year-old Ferrone Claiborne emerged as suspects. As for physical evidence, there was none. There was no blood, no hair, and no DNA to link Claiborne or Richardson to the crime scene. And Claiborne and Richardson didn't match suspect descriptions. Gibson's last words were, "They have dreadlocks," and one had a ponytail. Claiborne had short hair. Richardson, cornrows.
The two men charged say they're innocent, but agreed to a plea deal to a lesser charge. One of the men walks out of jail that day, the other given a short sentence. But this case is far from over.
In 2000, the feds announced they had arrested Claiborne and Richardson, charging them with conspiracy to sell crack cocaine and murder. Prosecutors in federal court argued a drug deal gone bad led to Gibson's death in these Waverly woods. A federal court jury actually found the two not guilty of the murder, but convicted them of drug charges. In a rare move at sentencing, the judge used a plea deal from a lower court to put the two men away for life for the murder of Officer Gibson.
Now, let me get this straight. No DNA, they had alibis, they were nowhere near the scene, they didn't even fit the description from the dying officer's own declaration or a young eyewitness. And a federal jury found both Terrence Richardson and Ferrone Claiborne not guilty of Alan Gibson's murder. Yet they're spending life in prison. Now, does that make sense to you? Well, Terrence and Ferrone say they did not commit this crime, and we're going to talk to their attorney later. But first, Alan's daughter, Crissana, who was just 8 years old when her father was killed, says she believes the right two men are behind bars. This is her first time speaking out about what happened to her father.
The best thing about my dad is that he was an incredible father. We would stay up late watching our TV shows, sharing a bowl of Apple Jack. He would take me to the gym with him when he would work out and go for rides around in the vehicle for hours. My father was 25 when he was killed. He was only a police officer with Waverly Police Department about 2 months before he was shot. My dad was trying to get a drug task force together to try and fight the crime on drugs. From the research I've done and from the details from the case, my father was in the process of trying to arrest Terrence and Ferrone when he was shot. There was an altercation and my father was shot with his own service weapon by him. There's no doubt in my mind that the two men that are guilty are Terrence and Ferrone. Most people would say being sentenced to life for drug charges is extreme, but they were sentenced to life in prison for everything that took place while their drug deal was going on. The shooting my father, killing him. I don't see any point in this case being brought up again. All of the evidence was there in the beginning and it's there now, pointing towards Terrence and Ferrone. Everyone has forgot that my dad was the victim in all of this. He was the one whose life was taken away. Terrence and Ferrone aren't the victims.
Well, Crissana, this clearly is a terrible loss, and I'm very, very, very sorry for that. And everyone has not lost sight of the fact that your father is a victim here. I certainly have not. You've not spoken out about this before. Tell me why not?
For a long time, I didn't really know what to say, because when I did try to talk about it when I was younger, I was told that, I needed to just let it go, or I needed to get over it. So
your father is someone that you've never forgotten, and you very much keep him alive in your mind and your thoughts. And these are some of the things that kind of memorialize him in your memory, right? You keep
Yes.
these things near and dear to your heart.
I do.
And his glasses, his badge and name tag, and this is a medal. This is a sample of his favorite cologne.
That's
And
the last bottle that he ever bought of it.
yeah, and you keep these things, prominent in your home
I
and
do.
life, so you don't forget him at all.
Exactly.
You keep him very much alive, and I'm glad that you do. That helps, doesn't it?
It does.
You've heard some of the argument that the people in jail aren't the ones that did this, but you think they are. Why do you reject the arguments that they're not?
I was present through, the trials and everything. I was there for all of it. And I remember a lot of that. And then as an adult, I have spoke with the authorities that were over the case and worked the case and everything. And they've, gave me information, everything from then to go over. And I feel that, they did their job correctly. And I haven't seen anything that's made me feel otherwise. And I just feel in my heart that they are the right ones.
When they were arrested and charged with killing your father, they both took a plea deal. And when they took a plea deal, that meant to you they wouldn't take a plea, they wouldn't plead for something they didn't do, right?
I don't know why they would take it if they didn't have something to do with it. I would have.
They say that they took a plea deal because they had a public defender who told them, you're facing the death penalty. And their thought was, we've been railroaded to this point. We got arrested with no evidence. They don't have any DNA that says we were there. There's no blood evidence that says we were there. The eyewitness descriptions of your father don't match either one of them. Another young eyewitness, just a 10-year-old girl nearby, described who she saw come out of the woods, didn't match either one of them. They both had alibis for being somewhere else at the time. And despite all of that, they were arrested and held. And they were told, you can take a plea deal or you can face the death penalty. And they both say they thought, this ain't going very well. We better make a deal to save our lives, because if this goes the way it's going, they're going to kill us. Does that hold any water with you at all?
Some of the information there's things lacking as far as their alibis did fall through and he described a shirt that one of them was wearing, and later on, that shirt was found in one of the homes.
Well, here's an excerpt from the 10-year-old witness statement. She says, "I saw the man with the dreads peeking around the other end of the building. I'm not sure what kind of clothes he had on, but I know he had on a white shirt. He was kind of fat and had hair on his chin. I saw blood on his shirt, and he had blood on his hands." That's what she said. And that's the one that supposedly had dreadlocks. And this is a silhouette that she picked out in the photo lineup, the silhouette versus the actual suspect.
Right. And a silhouette, my opinion, doesn't really give you much information. Can't really distinguish who it is through a silhouette.
When we come back, Crissana meets Terrence and Ferrone's family for the first time, and talk about it when we come back. Crissana believes very strongly that the right people are in jail for this. Tell me how you guys feel about it. And later,
After my father was shot, Police Chief Warren Stirrup showed up on scene, and the first thing that he did was pick up my father's service weapon and wipe it off. He took my dad's police cruiser, and it ended up being detailed.
I will tell you categorically that no, I would never do anything like that. But I'll tell you what did happen.
I understand that Terrence and Ferrone's families are angry, hurt that they are in prison. You know, at least their families get to see them. They still get to have a birthday every year. They still get to have the holidays. I'll never have that chance with my dad.
over 20 years ago, Terrence Richardson and Ferrone Claiborne were arrested for the murder of Crissana's father, police officer Alan Gibson. Both men say they are innocent of his murder, but claim they were coerced into pleading guilty to lesser charges to avoid facing the death penalty. A year later, the pair was indicted on federal charges for a drug conspiracy that resulted in the murder of Officer Gibson. Now, the jury found them not guilty of murder, but guilty of the drug charge, which normally would not carry a life sentence. But in a rare legal move, the judge referenced their previous guilty pleas and sentenced them to life. Now, their attorney, Jarrett Adams, says there's plenty of evidence pointing to another suspect.
New evidence uncovered in the decades-old murder of a Virginia police officer.
The new evidence in these court filings points to another suspect. A suspect the Commonwealth's attorney at the time now admits he had no knowledge of.
This filing contains 3 critical pieces of new evidence.
First, a handwritten letter from an eyewitness. The witness writes, saw a man with dreads. Second, evidence of a photo lineup in which that witness picked out not Claiborne or Richardson, but a man with dreadlocks. Third, an anonymous tip left on a state police answering machine naming the same man identified in the photo lineup.
We are a step closer to what we hope is finally justice.
That's attorney Jarrett Adams. His clients, Ferrone Claiborne and Terrence Richardson, have always maintained they had nothing to do with the 1998 murder of Waverly Police Officer Alan Gibson.
It's undisputed that they did not get a fair shake at justice.
Well, now, Jarrett has been fighting for Terrence and Ferrone for over 5 years. He says he knows what his clients are going through because he experienced it himself.
At the age of 17, I was sentenced to 28 years in a maximum security prison. I was falsely accused of a sexual assault I didn't commit. If you can't afford to prove your innocence, well, the court affords an attorney to you. And that defense contributed to me being found guilty.
And I can remember, sitting in prison wondering when was it I was going home.
When I continued to see that my mother and my aunts weren't broken and they were fighting for my innocence, I decided that if I didn't have the energy to fight for myself, I most certainly could find the energy to fight for them. The court unanimously decided to overturn my conviction.
After being released in February of 2007, I went on to school and I ended up graduating from associate's degree, bachelor's degree, and a law degree from Loyola School of Law in Chicago. And one of the first cases that I took was Ferrone Claiborne and Terrence Richardson. The advantages me representing someone in a case like this is, well, I've been through it before, so I'm able to relate to the family in a way that I don't know of any lawyers that can.
Crissana was 10 years old when she sat in the courtroom and watched Terrence and Ferrone's federal trial. Now, she's not spoken to the family, has not met their attorney. Today is her first meeting with Ferrone's sister, Felisha, and Terrence's daughter, Iquisha, along with the pair's attorney, Jarrett Adams. So you're okay with meeting them, right? Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I'd like for them to come on out and join us at this point, and we'll have a conversation about all this.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
How you doing? Pleasure. Good. How are you? Good to meet you. Well, thank you all for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Jarrett, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We've been talking about this, and Crissana believes very strongly that the right people are in jail for this. You guys feel that the wrong people are in jail for this.
Correct.
Tell me how you guys feel about it.
I feel like everything that was said and done points to them not being guilty. I'm sorry that, Officer Gibson had passed doing all of this, and my condolences to you. But I just feel like we want to have the right people so that we can have justice for everyone.
What do you think about this?
I feel the same way. I feel that through it all, the facts remain the same. The evidence are there that they weren't there at the time. And I, like I said, just hope that they can find the real killers, and as much condolences to Ms. Crissana.
And none of the three of you have any evidence whatsoever. You just have feelings about it.
You might not ever see me again in person. I want you to know they've told you a version of events that are absolutely unsupported by the record. And I just want you to have an open heart and an open mind, because when that shot went off on that day in 1998, there were 3 people killed. That was Terrence, Ferrone, and your father.
None of the three of you have any evidence whatsoever. You just have feelings about it.
Mm-hmm. I have feelings, but I also go by the facts that have been found in the case.
Mm-hmm. You just know what others have found. You don't have any personal facts or evidence about it.
No.
You just know what has been turned up in this. And like you, for example, were saying that some of the things that I hadn't mentioned yet is that some of these alibis had recanted their alibis, right?
Right.
And you're correct about that. That some of these alibis, when they dug into them, they changed their story and didn't. For example, Terrence's friend had an alibi, and this individual had just returned home from prison for 8 years and was facing new charges for sexual assault. And he changed his statement regarding the alibi, and those pending charges that he was facing were all of a sudden dismissed. And the friend's girlfriend recanted an alibi for Terrence whenever these other charges were dismissed. And I think that's a matter of record. Jared, what do you want to say?
You know, Thank you for this opportunity, Dr. Phil. I've had the opportunity to sit in the green room and for the first time, really hear from Crissana. So the realization of the multiple victims that this has created hit me in the green room. You might not ever see me again in person. I want you to know these people lied to you, Crissana. They've told you a version of events that are absolutely unsupported by the record. My heart breaks as I'm looking at the pictures and I'm understanding that you're operating off of what was told to you, and that's okay, because you were told by the authorities. We have so much trust in our authorities, and like Dr. Phil stated when the show first started, we have to have that trust, but they are not all good authorities. And I just want you to have an open heart and an open mind, because when that shot went off on that day in 1998, there were 3 people killed. That was Terrence, Ferrone, and your father. They're in prison for the rest of their life. And the evidence is clear, and it was withheld by the authorities. Nothing my investigation uncovered produced the evidence. It just found the evidence. And your father deserves closure. Your family does as well. And I just pray that you walk away with an open heart and understand, if you ever want to see the evidence for yourself, I'll show it to you. I'll give you every filing. They had nothing to do with the death of your father.
Well, let's take a break for a minute. When we come back, we're going to hear from one of the jurors from the federal trial. Plus, Crissana gave a statement 3 years ago to the press that Jarrett said was encouraging. He'll tell us why when we come back. This wasn't a close call.
We didn't feel that it was a close call.
Well, the interesting thing is, just listening to Dawn Wright, right now explain, she never saw the young girl's statement identifying someone else running from the scene.
You're referring to exculpatory evidence, and they withheld it from the defense.
The state court guilty pleas that Terrence and Ferrone entered into, it's the crux of their case.
There are some people who just will never understand why someone would plead guilty to something they didn't do.
My family had ran out of money, and then people was talking about giving us the death penalty. When our attorneys came to us and said that this was the best deal, what else was I supposed to do? Pleading guilty was the only way to end up saving our life.
Well, why do people admit to a crime they didn't commit? Jarrett says it happens all the time. I work a lot with the Innocence Project, as you know, Jarrett, and I've always said that I think one of the worst things that could happen to a family of a victim that's lost their life is to have the wrong person executed and then find out after the fact, oh my God, we killed the wrong person. And then they have to live with that, and then find out who the right person is, and now they probably can't be held accountable because they've executed somebody else for the crime. Now they've got to live with that. The worst thing in the world is not get justice and exact a penalty on the wrong person. And I've talked to families that have been through this. Horrible. It's a horrible thing. You don't want that. That's for sure. And you also don't want the person that's guilty to get away with it. So you just want justice. You want the right people to pay the ultimate price.
I just want justice, and I want my dad to be able to rest in peace.
That's right. And you should. And y'all agree with that, right?
Of course. Of course.
Now, Dawn was a member of the jury that found Terrence and Ferrone not guilty of the murders, and she's joining us virtually. Dawn, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to what we've been talking about here, and listen, I'm all about accountability. I'm about people being held accountable for the things that they've done, but I'm also about justice. You were on the jury that found Terrence and Ferrone not guilty of the murder.
Right.
What was the general logic of the jury that found them not guilty of killing Officer Gibson?
we felt, in the officer's own words, that he was almost apologetic in his words. And somewhere I have the transcript where he said, he got my gun, he shot me with my own gun. I think he felt a certain level of responsibility for it, and I think they tussled with it and struggled. And so it was not a good situation, but
this wasn't a close call.
We didn't feel that it was a close call.
And Jarrett, you've looked into this pretty deeply.
Yeah.
What was your finding?
Well, the interesting thing is, just listening to Don Wright, right now explain, she never saw the young girl's statement identifying someone else running from the scene. The jury never heard that there was a photo lineup that identified the same person that was running away from the scene. The jury never heard that there was a 911 call that came in and corroborated all two aforementioned pieces of evidence. So the fact that they're found not guilty in this federal jury, where the stakes are higher than any other court, and they found them not guilty, and they did not have the evidence pointing to their innocence, says a lot. And, this is why we're arguing that a complete and full and open investigation should be done.
So, and you're referring to exculpatory evidence, and they withheld it from the defense.
Right, and to not speak with any legalities, hours after Officer Gibson is shot, this young girl comes forward out of the crowd and says she saw something. The authorities didn't take her to the police station, didn't take her to the DA's office. They took her to the house of another sheriff, where she was essentially interrogated for about 5 to 6 hours, where she identified the person that she saw. And they withheld this piece of evidence from that day. They had this all along. And it's a shame, because now we're begging the Attorney General's office to allow us the opportunity to put people under oath, and they have no desire to do so. So that tells you what? If people are not interested about finding out something, that means they already know or have no desire to know.
Anybody would say that's troubling if that's what took place. When we come back, Jarrett is going to argue in front of the Virginia Supreme Court. Is he ready, and what's the thrust of his argument? He'll tell us when we come back.
After my father was shot, Police Chief Warren Stirrup showed up on scene, and the first thing that he did was pick up my father's service weapon and wipe it off. Instead of going to the hospital with my dad, he took my dad's police cruiser, and it ended up being detailed. Then during the trials, Chief Stirrup testified on behalf of Terrence and Ferrone instead of on behalf of my father, who was his police officer that was killed by these two men. I believe Chief Stirrup acted very suspiciously.
Joining us virtually is the former police chief of Waverly, Virginia, Warren Stirrup, to address Crissana's statements. Thank you so much, Warren, for joining us.
Okay, I'm here. I can't tell you that I'm glad to be here, because this is sort of a heart-wrenching type of event for me.
Well, I'm sure that it is, and you've heard what Crissana had to say.
What I just heard, I guess Crissana got that type of information from someone, but that is not correct.
Well, what is correct? Because she says that what she understands is that you picked up the gun at the scene without any gloves, didn't preserve it correctly, and took it to your cruiser and put it in the car instead of preserving it, maintaining a chain of evidence at the time. Yeah, well, that is true. I did pick up the weapon. It was me and a sheriff deputy down there in the wooded area. And when you are in a situation like that, you sort of have tunnel vision. Now, I knew I was going back up to make sure I can get the emergency crew down there. And so instead of leaving Alan's gun down on the ground and the deputy trying to attend to him,
and not being able to see what's going on around him, I took Alan's weapon up to lock it away in the cruiser. Now I hear that I wiped off fingerprints, and I'm not gonna even entertain that. I will tell you categorically that no, I would never do anything like that. And that really sets a narrative, and that's what this whole thing is all about, a narrative. Let me back up here. My police department was a small department. We had no investigator. So the sheriff's office took over, and that was delightful to them because they had been out of Waverly ever since I got there. And they never wanted me there, but now they are there, and they are gonna write this narrative that is gonna color me. But I can guarantee you that wiping off the weapon never happened. But I'll tell you what did happen. The citizens of Waverly, first of all, they were in shock, especially because of the police officer that was killed. Alan was known throughout the community as one of the best police officers that the town had had in a very long time. And the common sentiment was this: why him? Of all those people that you have on that force, why him? He was a nice guy. That's the way the town felt. But in real time, the citizens found their way to me to tell me that the wrong people were arrested. And they gave up the names of the people who they said did that deed on that day.
So you don't think that it was Terrence and Ferrone?
The town people to this day will tell you who was in the town that day and who Alan struggled with. And it was not Richardson or Claiborne.
But you have a name.
Oh, yes, I do have a name. The town people to this day will tell you who was in the town that day and who Alan struggled with. And it was not Richardson or Claiborne.
But you have a name.
Oh, yes, I do have a name. Are you asking me for the name?
No, I'm
the
not.
Name was, I'll give it to you.
No, I'm not asking you to. I'm not asking you to say it on.
Who it is, Dr. Phil.
Yeah, I know you know who it is, and we don't want to say it on television because he's not here to defend himself. So I can't, say that here. Did you have Officer Gibson's cruiser detailed right after this?
Absolutely not. I have no idea where that come from. I would like to know where that come from, and that would fit into this narrative that was written. So that's that, because at the state level, remember, the sheriff's office took the investigation. Now, I feel a little disturbed because on that day, after working Alan's shift at 6 a.m., I finally got to go home around 11:30 p.m. But no sooner than I walk into my house, I get a phone call from, I think it was FBI agent, who wanted me back down to the station. Someone had information, and they were not going to give it to anyone but me. They heard the names that were put forth, and they went and delivered it to the sheriff's office. And any information that I wanted from them, they locked me out. Wouldn't give me not one piece of information. Okay. I provided information to them about the guy with the dreadlocks and all, and I get different responses. One says he's in a neighboring county at a hardware store and has a receipt. Yeah, if you could believe it, that. The sheriff himself tells me that, and that was the lead investigator, and the sheriff tells me, no, he's in a different county. getting a haircut. It takes time to grow those dreads. People don't just get them cut off like that. But the moment that it came out that Alan said dreadlocks, this guy cuts his dreadlocks off. Highly suspicious. And he's the guy everyone said did it.
Well, it sure seems like there's a lot of questions swirling around about this. We've got to take a break. And I want to hear what Jarrett's plans are and what Terrence and Ferrone wanted me to know. We'll be right back. Terrence and Ferrone, I have a statement, reads, "Thank you, Dr. Phil, for allowing us to share our fight for justice and opportunity to prove our innocence. For the past 23 years, we have been wrongfully incarcerated for the murder of Officer Gibson. We had no knowledge or involvement in the death of Officer Gibson, and we pray that the family and daughter of Officer Gibson joins in our request for a full Department of Justice investigation into the police corruption that framed us for this murder and the authorities still trying to bury the truth today. Until justice is served, Officer Gibson's family cannot have true closure, and we remain innocent yet buried alive." Terrence and Ferrone. So that's what they have to say. Jarrett, what are you going to have to say when you stand before the Supreme Court?
I have a simple question to the Supreme Court of Virginia. Does innocence matter? Because if it does, they'll have the opportunity to have a hearing where they can call witnesses, have subpoena power, and put together their case. Because the only time they ever were in court to present their case on this murder of Officer Gibson, they were found not guilty. I simply want nothing more than to have the power to use the court and the tools of the court to get down to the truth. Everyone deserves that. And I think that one of the things that Chief Stirrup touched on was this. Terrence and Ferrone's name came up, not through chance. The sheriffs down in that town did a sweep of what could be called nothing less than a roundup of all young black men with hair. And when they pressed, people started throwing out names. And the wheel landed on Terrence and Ferrone. I am begging anyone to come and see the open files that I have.
If there are irrefutable facts, you would want to know it.
I would want to know, yes.
And, he's offered to share the files with you in totality so you can look at it all and consider it. Are you willing to look at the files?
I'm willing to look at, anything. I read all of what was sent in the beginning. Mm-hmm. If there's anything else other than that, I'm open to seeing.
You're willing to look at it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You just want to be sure in your heart that the right people are where they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
And if at the end of all of that you believe they are, then you're at peace with it. But you want to know that you're right.
And I want to, be the voice for my father in all of this because he doesn't have a voice in it anymore. And I want to be able to know that he's at peace.
All right, well, we're out of time for today, and I want to thank everybody for being here, and thank you all for having the opportunity, the willingness to sit and talk about this in an open way. For more information about this case, you can log on to notguiltyservinglife.org. Before we go, Jarrett wrote a memoir that I want to bring up, and he damn sure earned the right to write this book, and it's called Redeeming Justice. It's about his life going from a defendant to a defender and his fight for equity on both sides of a broken justice system. The book is currently an editor's pick on Amazon, and you can grab one online or at your favorite bookstore. I highly recommend it. For more information about today's episode, log on to drphil.com. And if you want to keep up with all things Dr. Phil, then scan the flow code on the screen that you see right now, and it will link you to exclusive content you cannot get anywhere else. Plus, you can follow and subscribe to my podcast, Fill in the Blanks, as well as Robin's podcast, I've Got a Secret with Robin McGraw. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.